I think, and I hope you'll agree with me, that redemption is just an objectively great word. Like it just sounds strong. It sounds like it should be at the start of a hype video for a playoff sports series or the NCAA tournament. Like you hear quiet violin music in the background, and you hear redemption. What are you willing to give to change the path of your life, with like highlights in the background and stuff. The word means to buy something back at a cost to yourself. You're acquiring something at a price. Typically something that you once had and are now redeeming, buying back. Today we're reading a story of redemption. And after the darkness and despair of so much of the book of Judges, especially its final chapters, this was a story of redemption that was so desperately needed by its first readers. At first, when we dive into the book of Ruth, it might look a little bit just like another Judges-style story of dysfunction. You get a man from Bethlehem, Elimelech, who abandons the promised land during a time of hardship and who promptly dies in the foreign country to which he had fled. His sons, Mahlon and Chilion, take Moabite wives, a thing that the Israelites were not supposed to do, and then his two sons promptly die as well before having any children. Their mother, Naomi, and their wives, Ruth and Orpah, are the only ones left. But the story takes a turn when Naomi chooses to return to Israel and urges her daughter-in-laws to stay with their families, with their people. Orpah listens and returns to her people, choosing the logical and easy answer to her situation. But Ruth refuses to leave her mother-in-law's side. Ruth chooses to leave her family, her people, her land, and to go with Naomi to Israel. And despite the apparent unfaithfulness of the men in the family, in abandoning the promised land and not listening to God's commandments, God remains faithful to them. Naomi, we find, has been blessed with a true friend in Ruth, and Ruth has found a purpose in the God of Israel. Ruth and Naomi return to Bethlehem and seek to survive on what they can glean from the fields. If you remember from earlier this year, there was a commandment that those who owned fields, you didn't harvest the corners and you only harvested everything once. And so the poor were allowed to go back in and glean what was left. By divine providence, Ruth ends up gleaning in the field of Boaz, a distant relative of her deceased husband. Boaz is told by his fellow workers of Ruth's love for her mother-in-law Naomi and chooses to reward her with a choice position amongst the women of his own clan who are gathering with the men. Naomi realizes who Boaz is and remembers that God set a law down centuries before about how widows were to be cared for in the event of the death of their spouses. How the poor were to be raised back up out of misfortune. And so Naomi makes a plan, and Ruth takes their hopes to Boaz in the form of a request that he would be their kinsman redeemer. We'll talk more about as we go through, but essentially that he would be the one of the family tasked with lifting them out of poverty and restoring what was lost. Boaz agrees, but he tells them there is one last hurdle that needs to be overcome in order to accomplish their hope. There is another potential redeemer who must be given the chance to do so first. And so we rejoin the story this morning as Boaz goes to arrange for the redemption of Ruth and Naomi. But as we read the story, we're going to realize that there isn't actually just one redeemer here in the story. There are actually at least three that we see. So let's read Ruth 4, verses 1 through 4. Now, Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down, and behold, the redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Turn aside, friend, sit down here." And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city, and Boaz said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. And then he said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he, the other potential redeemer, said, I will redeem it. And we'll pause there. The core question here for the whole first half of Ruth chapter 4 is, who is going to be the redeemer? Who will take up that mantle? Boaz wants to do it. He's happy to take that burden, but there is another closer relative to Naomi's deceased husband, and so he must first choose whether he will take that burden. I don't know about you, but as I read through these first few verses of the show, chapter, it felt a little bit like we were on a game show of some sort. Who wants to be a kinsman redeemer? Love is blind, but the town elders see what you're doing. I don't know. I clearly don't have a gift for reality TV show naming. It's a good thing I'm doing this instead. But there is really this sense of tension, this kind of who is going to come out of this with what they want. There's a whole setup going on. It feels a little smooth and planned and rehearsed at the beginning, and it's because it was. Boaz had set things up in this way. He is ready to redeem Naomi and Ruth. He wants to redeem them, but this closer relative has to be given the option first. But it's important to note, he hasn't done it so far. This is not a secret that Ruth and Naomi have come back. People know about this. It's a small community. We know what's going on. For some reason, this person hasn't done it yet, and that means something is getting in the way. So Boaz sets up a gentle confrontation. He grabs the guy coming into town. He says, sit down with me. And then, maybe before the guy could even really realize what was happening, all of a sudden, boom, here are 10 of the city elders too. And so it's unavoidable at this point. This guy knows, something official is happening here. Boaz has brought authoritative witnesses to our conversation to testify about the conclusions that we reach. And so Boaz lays out the situation. Naomi is selling her dead husband's land. Important side note here, they had already sold the land. They sold it when they left the country. You don't leave the country for years on end and leave arable land in a farming society just kind of sitting there for whoever wants to do whatever. They sold the land when they left town. What Naomi is selling, quote unquote, is the right to go and buy that land back at a reasonable price. Naomi is selling the right to buy the land back into the family. And essentially the price, well, we'll see that as we go through. In the Old Testament law, there was a provision of the kinsman redeemer. If a family member grew destitute, they had to sell their land or even sell themselves into slavery to pay their debts. Then the nearest family member who could do so was to go and buy the land or buy them back so that they might be restored. He was to redeem the fallen family member. And at least initially, the other potential kinsman redeemer, he's on board. He's kind of all about it. Boaz presents him with the charge, the call, the opportunity to step up. And the guy says, sure, yeah. Where do I sign on the dotted line? But we should know right off the bat, and the Hebrew readers very much would have known this, that we are not supposed to think very highly of this other kinsman redeemer. You know why we aren't supposed to think very highly of him? Because he's called the other kinsman redeemer. He doesn't get a name. We don't find out this guy's name. Even the unfaithful family members who wandered off into Moab and died there, they get names. But the other kinsman redeemer, he doesn't get a name. In the Hebrew, if you directly translate what he's called, the best I could think of was Mr. So-and-so. He's kind of called that guy over there. Like this is just that random guy. It's very much kind of putting him down just with the way it's describing him. So we should expect that there is something sketchy in the reason that he hasn't stepped up to do this yet. And if he's stepping up now, there must be a catch. And so we see that in verses 5 and 6. Let's read those. Then Boaz said, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, You also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance." Then the Redeemer said, "I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it." And there it is. See, there were two things at question here in the passage, and the kinsman redeemer was willing to deal with one of them, but not the other. Those two things are Naomi's land and Ruth's hand. The kinsman redeemer was willing to buy the land back to deal with that side of the equation because, to be entirely honest, it was simply a no doubt good choice for him because Naomi had no biological children. See, here's how the role of the kinsman redeemer worked. If you were the kinsman redeemer and you took up that role as the kinsman redeemer, the thing redeemed stayed in the family. Specifically, not your immediate family, the immediate family of the person who had had to sell it. And so, in fact, it would belong to that original family and not to you. But Naomi has no biological children. And so the kinsman redeemer says, I am more than willing to take care of Naomi's needs for whatever is left of her life in exchange for keeping all of her land when she dies. Essentially, he would be getting to double his family's inheritance there in the Promised Land. Their permanent blessing of land would be doubled in size. It's a one-time fee for a never-ending benefit. This is a great deal for him. But Boaz does the aha moment on him after he's already committed to wanting the land. If this was an episode of Columbo, Boaz would turn to him and say, "Now, I just have one more question for you." And it's always that one question. Man, not as many people knowing who Columbo is as I had expected. I suspect I will get a better reaction to that one later. Columbo was this old-time detective, and his signature was he would let the person think they were getting away with it, and then he had his one last question that broke open the case and revealed their lies to the world around them. And Boaz does just that. He has this one question. He says, "I'm going to put my finger on the pain point right here, and I'm going to show everybody around us the thing that you've been trying to skirt the edges of, which is that the kinsman redeemer was trying to pull a fast one. He was trying to only take the thing in the deal that benefited him. He was not trying to function as a redeemer. He was trying to function as a self-interested investor. He would put the money in, but only if he was the one who won in the long run. And Boaz says, not so fast there. If you're going to get the land, you also have to take Ruth's hand. Naomi is old. She will not be having any more kids. But Ruth is young, plenty young to have children. And this is the rub. This is where two Old Testament rules kind of brush up against each other. The kinsman redeemer and levirate marriage. Getting married to a widow whose husband had died without providing her with children. If you did your duty as that kinsman redeemer, that levirate marriage, and you married the widow to help her have children for the purpose of inheritance, those children aren't yours. By inheritance law, they are the children of your dead relative that you are allowing to continue to have family there in Israel by your help. If they had had surnames back then, the kids would have had the dead husband's surname and not yours if it was different. So if the kinsman redeemer buys the land and is forced to take Ruth as a wife to do so, then when her children grow up, they will take Naomi's family land, not the kinsman redeemer and his family. He would be having to pay out of pocket for land that his immediate family would only keep for a short time before it went back into the control of a different family. And so the kinsman redeemer is stuck. He got Columboed. He got called out in front of the town elders. They all got shown that he is not actually willing to do this if it means going all the way. He wanted the land, but not if it cost him. That's why he had been waiting. He wanted Naomi to die. He would still have the right to buy it back into the family later on. If she died, he could just do it on a timeline where he doesn't have to take care of her. He's trying to do as little as possible in order to get as much as he can. In the film version of Sense and Sensibility that came out, goodness, 20, 30 years ago now, the movie opens with a father lying on his deathbed talking to his son. And during the course of their conversation, you find out that this is his eldest son. His eldest son's mother died in childbirth or soon thereafter. The man remarried, and this brother has three stepsisters. He has three sisters, half-sisters, and a stepmother. And in English property inheritance law, none of them can officially inherit any of the father's property or holdings or so on and so forth. And so the father begs the son on his deathbed, "You must take care of your sisters and your stepmother." And he assures him, "Yes, yes, certainly, Father, certainly I will." Which proceeds into the next 2 or 3 minutes of the movie, which is the son and his wife slowly convincing themselves that taking care of the stepmother and sisters means less and less and less and less help. This is our natural human thing. I want to get as much as I can. I want to give other people as little as possible. And so when the kinsman redeemer gets forced into making a decision, he says, "I'm not going to do it. I give up. I call uncle." He gives up his place in the story. He becomes Mr. So-and-so to the story. Someone who stepped out because they weren't willing to put anything in. So what he does is he fails as a redeemer, but he creates a powerful contrast with Boaz, the faithful redeemer. Let's read verses 7 through 13. "Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging to confirm a transaction. The one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the redeemer said to Boaz, 'Buy it for yourself,' he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, 'You are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon, and Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day.' Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, 'We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman.'" And we'll pause there. The end of these legal proceedings quickly become a community celebration of Boaz's actions. The people clearly love Boaz. They think the world of him, and this opinion seems to be well-deserved. Boaz, through careful planning, saw the hurt and the need of a family member and of a faithful Gentile. And he saw their worth. Despite the social stigmas and differences with Ruth in particular, he provided for their needs, and he even went beyond that, finding an opportunity to give of himself, to pay a price that would never be repaid in order to buy them back out of brokenness, to restore them to being a full part of God's people, and to bless them in every way that he could. And if that phrasing sounds familiar, it's because it's supposed to. Boaz is supposed to be one of the three main places in this passage that our hearts are supposed to see Jesus. A redeemer who loves his people, a redeemer who follows God's laws completely. We never see Boaz falter or fail in the story. He obeys the law even when it might lead to an outcome that is not what he wants. A redeemer who steps up when others are unwilling or unable and says, "I will pay the price. I will give of myself in order to bring restoration to another. I will make things right even if it costs me." A redeemer who makes a careful plan whereby he is able to save those he loves out of their brokenness in which they were mired. Boaz is a magnificent picture of God's love for us in his love for Naomi and Ruth, but he's not the last redeemer in the passage by a long shot, so we need to keep reading with verses 14 through 16. "Then the women said to Naomi," I forgot to read verse 13 at the end of the last one, so I'm going to read verse 13. If it's not on the screen, that's my fault and not the tech booths. "So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. When Naomi came back to Israel from her time in a foreign land, returning without husbands or sons, she gave a cry, sang a song of lament that's recorded in Ruth 1 and 2 as she came back. Her sorrow, her loss were well known by the women of the town, many of whom Naomi likely would have known in her younger years. When she comes back and the people say, "Look, it's Naomi, she's coming back," she says, "Don't call me Naomi anymore. Call me Mara," because Naomi means joyful, gladness, happiness, and Mara means bitter, angry, wronged. And now as God begins to bring restoration and redemption into Naomi's life, the women of the town come and they cry out with joy. They sing a song of thanksgiving to God about what he has done for Naomi. And in that song, that poem of happiness that we just read, we see a reference to a redeemer who's been with Naomi the whole time. I love this part because it's kind of like, it's another aha moment where the people in the background pull back the curtain on something we should have seen from the start, that there's been a second redeemer here the whole time. In verse 14, the women of the community call the child of Ruth and Boaz a redeemer for Naomi, that he has brought joy out of sadness. But a baby being a redeemer is kind of odd. A baby cannot pay a price. A baby cannot give of themselves for another. They are at the stage in life in which they constantly need us in order to not die. I mean, when you've gone through 4 newborns, the way that I have, they're all okay still. When I say going through them, it sounds a little odd. But when you've had 4 different newborns, at some point you realize the desperate fragility of infants. I think for me it fully landed back in California when Finn started choking on a piece of birthday party confetti that was exactly the right size and density to lodge in his throat and block the air. Babies aren't really ready to redeem anything. They cannot pay that price. But the thing is, I don't think the women were really primarily or only pointing to the baby. I think we saw that in verse 15. Did you notice that line there? It probably doesn't stick out to us as much or land as heavily today as it would have back then. The women, they say this new grandchild is a redeemer that Naomi needed. He will be a restorer of life, a nourisher of old age. And then it says, "For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." That's a ridiculous statement in a culture that saw men as being naturally more valuable than women. Again, ancient Near Eastern, not saying it was right. The ancient Near Eastern cultures viewed men as being up on this pedestal, and they say, no. Ruth is more to you than 7 sons. 7 is the Israelite number for perfection. So if you had the perfect number of sons, this is still better. What you have been given here is even better. This child's place as a redeemer isn't just about the child, it's about Ruth. She's the second successful redeemer of the passage. Because when they were in Moab still, and Naomi gets ready to go back, Ruth looks at Naomi, who has nothing to offer her, and says, "I am going to forsake the easy road. I'm going to leave my home. I'm going to leave my family. I'm going to leave my connections and my social sphere and my comfort zone, and I'm going to make you my goal in life. I'm going to go where you go. I'm going to make your good my good. I'm going to provide for you and uphold your life. I'm going to call you a friend in the truest sense of the word." And just like with Boaz, that's all supposed to sound familiar. Because any successful redeemer in the Bible is a shadow of the great and true Redeemer who is to come, the one who rode into Jerusalem on a donkey on Palm Sunday 2,000 years ago. A reflection of the God who said, "I will leave my home, forsake the easy road, and make your good my goal." I'm going to be with you in hardship and make sure that you will make it through to the other side. Both Ruth and Boaz function for us as pictures of Jesus, as promises of a perfect Redeemer who was yet to come. And speaking of Redeemers who are yet to come, let's get back to that third Redeemer in the passage, in the baby Obed. We'll read verses 17 through 22. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron, and Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse, and Jesse fathered David. I know. I hear it now coming from your minds and hearts. John, we had such a good thing going on, and you made us read another genealogy. I do. I know. I get it. I do. But the genealogies matter. Obed isn't being hailed as a redeemer here for anything he has done. He is still a baby. He has not done anything. He's being hailed as a source of redemption because of his symbolic importance as kind of the culmination of Ruth and Boaz's story so far, but also because he's the one who carries the story forward into the future. Do you remember where the book of Ruth takes place in the Bible? It is intentionally placed as the bridge of hope and redemption between the utter devastation and destruction of the book of Judges and the coming of the kings. Obed is the grandfather of David. He's this direct connection to the monarchy, the kings that are to come. And the kings, at all the times that they are actually functioning rightly and truly, are supposed to point us towards a perfect king, a heavenly king. They're pointing us towards God. And just as Boaz and Ruth serve as foreshadowing of the Savior who was one day to come, who would give of himself for others, Obed serves as a foreshadowing of the king who is one day to come, who will be the king of the universe and yet give his life for his people. There's a story told about something that happened in Russia hundreds of years ago. So when Tsar Nicholas II was leading Russia, he had this habit where he would dress up as a military officer and go and wander amongst the military. He wanted to kind of hear what was going on in a way that he felt like he wouldn't if he identified himself as the Tsar. And one day he decided to go check in on the son of a fallen friend, a friend who had died years before. And so he opens this little administrative office in the military headquarters, and he finds the man slumped over a desk with a bottle of alcohol and a pistol. And he says, "Oh my goodness, what is happening?" But he realizes that the man has drunk himself to sleep, and he begins trying to figure out what's happened. There's a pile of papers on the desk, and he quickly realizes from the numbers that the man had gotten himself into an incredible amount of gambling debt. He had tried to do financial prognostication in order to get himself out of the gambling debt, and he had just ended up spending more money there. He had gotten to the point where he had started embezzling military funds in order to try and pay off this debt so that he could continue doing his job. Nicholas became angry at the man and started going to the door to call the guards from outside to have them come and arrest him. And then he started thinking about his great love for the man's father, the great love that they had shared, and he decides to go a different direction with it. At the bottom of the final paper, there had been a hastily scribbled question as the man lost consciousness. It said, "Who can pay such a debt?" And according to this apocryphal story, Nicholas went in and wrote simply his name, his signature, at the bottom of the question. Now here's the thing. Nicholas's decision to pay the debts of the young man is laudable. It's a good thing. You're having mercy. You were seeking to love the child of one that who had loved you. It's laudable, but it's ultimately minor because what did it really cost him? Even a great debt like that is nothing compared to a royal treasury. Nicholas' decision to pay the debts was minor in my mind if we're thinking about the question of redemption. Because redemption isn't just about fixing something, it's about what it costs to fix something. What is the true price? And Jesus is our King who finds us in debt, all entirely of our own problem, and out of love for us, not out of his vast wealth, but in a way that barely affects him, but instead by taking the punishment for our debt upon himself. By taking our punishment upon him, pays the price for our sins. Ruth and Boaz and Obed are all pictures of the true Redeemer who is to come. And that's why the book ends with a genealogy, and why we end in the same place. Because that genealogy verbatim is found in Jesus' genealogy as well. The book of Ruth is saying someone is still to come who is the true Redeemer. That there's going to be another baby born in Bethlehem somewhere in the future who's going to be the one who fulfills every promise that Ruth and Boaz and Obed's stories make. And so our call, our application this morning is first and foremost to believe in that Redeemer. To believe that Jesus is who he said he was, that he is the fulfillment, the perfection of what we see in Ruth and Boaz and Obed. But it's also to become like the Redeemer who is pictured here. To become one who is willing to give up out of our own good for the good of others. One who is willing to embrace true friendship and to help our friends through thick and thin. One who is able to value people and seek to fulfill their needs as we are made able. One who is willing to give our time and effort and energy and money and heart to provide for the redemption of those around us. We'll never do it perfectly. That's okay. We have a Savior who did. And in growing in his example, we become more and more reflections of our Redeemer.